Welcome to the diner where we serve up culture from a short order kitchen. Step up to the counter and let us serve you a slice of mental pie. Not a feast, just a snack, a deep thought to chew on from a big, meaty book. It'll go good with a cup of coffee, and then you can get back to the fray with a few beautiful new thoughts to think. It's season 2, and the Blue Plate special is still Timothy Petitsis' The Ethics of Beauty, that daunting doorstopper of popular theology that turns out to be amazingly accessible and powerfully relevant. This time we're talking about his essay on sex and gender, Only Priests Can Marry, the reconciliation of men and women in Christ. Roll up to the counter and have a cup of Wetsuit with us.
Okay, we're back, and this time we really are going to talk about gender. Laura, why don't you share the quote that you were talking about?
Okay, so like so many things in Ethics of Beauty, there are hundreds of good quotes that you can meditate on for hours. But the one I wanted to draw everybody's attention to is when he says, Christian gender defeats and yet embraces both the worldly concept that men and women are complementary and the worldly concept that men and women are interchangeable. I think that this right here is the key to unlocking the stalemate, where a lot of where we are in our society. We have one faction espousing complementarianism and another faction espousing egalitarianism, and they're set at odds, and there is no progress made. There has been no progress made in reconciling these opposites that I've seen in the decades I've been following this discussion.
Right.
So if we're going to use chiasm, which Petitsis does, we have to see the one as the symbol of the other that unlocks the other in its actuality. So men and women are meant to be different precisely so that they can experience the highest unity, which can only come through symbolizing someone different than oneself. This is a unity at a far higher plane than mere interchangeability. And it's also at a far higher plane than complementarity. All these things are partially correct, but they are not the fullness in and of themselves. This is why people can't get 100% sold on the whole complementarianism versus egalitarianism thing.
Right.
Is because if you're thinking it through, you recognize that there are pieces of truth on both sides.
Exactly. And they have to be reconciled in order for us to have the complete truth. Like if you have one side or the other, if you choose a side, then you're missing something. And we all, I mean, people do choose sides, right? But I think we all kind of know that there's something on the other side that also belongs to the picture. And like you said, like the 3D glasses analogy, like you each side of it, that when you form that dichotomy, each side is only seeing a part of it. They're not seeing the completeness, the wholeness.
One of the writers that we haven't talked about a lot, but has a lot to say in terms of gender and sexuality, is Paul of Dokimov.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the concepts he points out early on in one of his works is the idea of bad masculinity and bad femininity. And we have to be really careful. And I think this is where people have a difficulty talking about the shadow sides of complementarianism and egalitarianism, is that neither one of these truly recognizes that there are bad versions of our sexuality.
Right.
They kind of both say, well, if you only follow my way, you'll have good versions of your gender and sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And we both know that's not true. We can see it in our experience.
Right.
We can see both complementarianism lived out in bad masculine and bad feminine ways,
Mm-hmm.
and egalitarianism lived out in bad masculine and bad feminine ways.
Right.
So we really need to enlarge our picture, enlarge our vision of the cosmos, so that we're not picking sides in a debate that's not meant to be a debate. It's meant to be a chiasm where we're constantly unfolding like a rose and revealing each other.
Right. And that sounds so foreign to anything that we're used to hearing. Like that just doesn't even... It's kind of like, well, what does that even mean? You know, usually people are focused on what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a man? You know, so they make up these lists of characteristics and traits, and you know, this is a real woman and this is a real man. And there's no room for more than just those things.
Right. And this is why, we've mentioned before, this is why I have a real problem with psychologizing gender in this way, is because not only is this psychologizing a problem, but also the way we identify ourselves psychologically. Like you just said, we have a tendency to list traits or labels of ourselves and our understanding of ourselves. And all of this is reductive. And the entirety of Christian experience rejects this labeling and reduction of the self. So anytime that we're looking for an easy answer to our embodied experience of gender and sexuality and our spiritual experience of gender and sexuality, we have a tendency to revert onto easy psychological categories.
Right.
Which are also made easy by the fact that this is what our society has to offer us, which is a lot of pop psychology, which is reductive, oversimplified examples of humanity that, okay, well, I can pick this tribe to belong to, or I can pick this box to put myself into.
Right.
But anytime we're going to do that to ourselves, we are necessarily circumscribing our lived experience in a way that's artificial.
Mm-hmm.
We are meant to be, saved. We're meant to, through the process of salvation, become friends of God. And, maybe this is a digression, but we've talked before about, the Myers-Briggs personality test, right?
Yes.
And this is the spiritual concern, is what personality type is Jesus? Okay, I'm just going to let that sit for a minute, because if you think about it, you should realize that every easy way to answer this question is going to exclude part of humanity from the answer, right? You cannot pick a personality type that is Jesus, because, well, if we're supposed to be like him, then we should all be like him in personality like that. It doesn't work, does it?
Mm-hmm.
It starts to make us exclude parts of ourselves in artificial ways.
Right.
So in thinking this through, I came to the conclusion that personality tests give us a great place to start and understanding where we're starting. But the ultimate goal of human personality development is to transcend, is to, listen to this, Lisa, we have to express the chiastic structure of personality.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, we're not supposed to be just introverted or just extroverted. For example, we have to be both in good introversion and good extroversion. We have to shed the shadow sides of both of those, the shyness and the shame and the posturing and the ego, and come out and be able to be a fully integrated person who is capable of the depth of introversion and the breadth of extroversion. It's chiastic, see?
Yeah.
Top down, side to
Yeah.
side. It's 3D. Each of the traits can be in, like Myers-Briggs or any of the other things. You can look at them in this structure, that the goal is not to say, oh, here's where I am on the spectrum. The goal is to grow the self in a chiastic way, to elongate where you need to and widen where you need to,
Mm-hmm.
so that you grow in volume
As a whole person. Yeah.
as a whole person.
Whole person. Yes. We're a lot of times we kind of pigeonhole ourselves into personality, or, like the traits of masculine and feminine, and we're not allowing for the whole experience of being persons. And I've noticed, one of the things I've noticed is that, like, when you start listing traits, whether it's personality or gender or whatever, you'll always find somebody, especially if you're talking to other people about this, you'll find someone who says, well, I'm not that. So am I not a woman, or am I not a man, or am I not this, or am I not that? So then your list suddenly is just like, defunct. It doesn't work anymore because of that one exception. But you can't go around making exceptions all the time. So then where does that leave us, right? It becomes, that's how we can know that it's problematic to go about listing traits and trying to box ourselves in. And we don't even realize we're trying to box ourselves in. We're just trying to talk about our experience of reality, but we have to realize that there's more to it than just what we have already experienced and what we already know.
One of the ways that psychology has tried to interpret chiasm and gender is in the work of Carl Jung. Are you familiar with the concept of the anima and the animus?
Yes, a little bit. Not very much.
Yes. So just very simple. It's the idea that, if you're a woman, you have a side of yourself that is masculine or contains masculine imagery and messages from society. And if you're a man, you have the feminine side that contains feminine traits and messages from society.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important to stress because one of the things that's true is that we get a lot of ideas about psychological gender, as you and I are talking about it here, from society at large. And these aspects are demonstrably different in different societies, throughout the world and throughout time.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a permeability here that it's not absolute.
Yeah.
And so you can start with the Jungian idea of the anima and the animus to start to see where chiasm starts. The anima and the animus is not chiasm, but it's a way into this way of thinking about gender.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you, as a fully human person, we contain aspects of both the masculine and the feminine that are not divided, that want to be brought into unity with each other. So we're talking about gender in this case, not just in relating to people of the opposite sex, but we're talking about relating within ourselves with aspects of ourselves that don't necessarily fit well with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And part of this growing into integrated personality, into wholeness of personality, is taking aspects of ourselves that don't fit and finding how they image each other. So an example of this might be from an Orthodox perspective. Let's like the irascible power, for example. The irascible power is the part of our soul that becomes angry. And this is something that we have a difficult time dealing with because we're used to thinking of anger only in sinful terms, but the scriptures themselves tell us, be angry and sin not. So there's the key. There's the chiastic key, is anger. We experience one axis of anger. So if you think of the chiastic structure of the cosmos as, just a coordinated grid, a vertical axis and a horizontal axis, we as sinful human beings experience our irascible power only on one axis.
Mm-hmm.
And part of our task in integrating our personalities is to experience that anger on the other axis as well.
That reminds me of something that my brother has said to me often, where he said that, anger is a symptom, I guess you could say, of something that's off in your surroundings, right? And it gives you the energy to deal with what's going on. So if it's really bad, like you can imagine being angry because someone is like attacking your children, right? Your body would go into fight or flight mode, and you would be prepared to take care of your children and to guard them and protect them, right? And that anger would fuel the energy that you needed. But a lot of times what's going wrong then is not necessarily something that we have to fight about physically, right? So then we have this anger and we use it wrongly. So like you were saying, we're experiencing it on that one axis, but we don't often get the chance to experience it on the other axis. Or even like if we're talking about anger against our sins, right? Like against the passions and against the things that draw us away from God and that cut off our communion with Him. It's good to be angry at those things and to use that energy to fight against the passions. But we often suppress the anger because of that unilateral experience on the one plane where we think we shouldn't have it at all. We need to get rid of it completely.
Right. So applying this, again, bringing it back around to gender, because like the last couple times, we're having a really hard time sticking to this gender thing. Because
Right.
chiasm itself is such a powerful explanatory model for reconciling so many opposites and differences. To bring this back to gender, before we wrap up for this week, we can start to see gender as two axes on a plane, right? And I want to jump back to Paul Evdokimov because he uses two words, one everybody knows and one nobody knows. He describes male spirituality as ecstatic
and female spirituality as enstatic.
Hmm.
Okay, so this is explicitly chiastic. So to be ecstatic is to go out from the self.
Right.
To be enstatic is to go deeper in the self. So masculine spirituality starts ecstatically and needs to deepen enstatically.
Mm-hmm.
And feminine spirituality starts enstatically and has to develop ecstatically. And they become mirror images of each other, not looking the same. Enstasy does not look the same lived in the female experience as the male experience. I mean, we can talk about this just in terms of embodied enstasy, the profound experience of childbearing, of being
Right.
pregnant. I mean, that is a strong archetype of enstasy, is the deepening of the self so that it creates new life. Men also experience enstasy, but it looks different and it feels different. But it's the chiastic mirror of that enstasy. Childbearing, in that respect, the creative act of childbearing is reflected in the masculine experience as well. And that's why you can't just jump into this complementary egalitarian dichotomy, is because that dichotomy does not allow for the chiastic deepening in both sides.
Right. Right. So let's stop there and let's think about Enstasy and Ecstasy, because that's really something, that's a mind-blowing thing that probably our listeners will want to spend some time with. So think about what that means. Look the words up if you want, and spend some time really contemplating what that experience then is going to look like in the masculine and in the feminine experience. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us at the diner. If this season resonates with you, you may be interested to know that over the summer, I released the sex ed curriculum I created for my own teenagers. Sex Ed for Sane People is a high school level discourse on human sexuality that, among many things, is informed by the understanding explained here in Ethics of Beauty. It's interactive, meant to be customized by you for your students, and it's available for download on my website, lauraewolf.com.